In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between God's picture and the world's picture. So God, being sovereign over all, being the one who created us, he knows exactly how he has designed us and for what reason he has designed us since before the creation of the earth. He knows exactly what he intends to do with us. He knows the way that he has designed us to achieve his goals, his end game, to fulfill his word. And in this video, I'm going to give you some different examples to help you understand what I've been talking about in other videos, why it is that it is a problem that the world has set up this false gospel and the way that that false gospel operates, the false gospel being science. So I've talked with you many times about, Darwinian science coming in and fundamentally rejecting God, rejecting that there's a creator, saying that we evolved, rejecting everything that he established, the values that he established for us to take care of one another, to be mindful of one another. And he replaced that with what? Survival of the fittest. Now you're just here to compete. You are evolving. You are brilliant. You are your own God. And also all of the things that God established in order to warn his people, signals that he established with his people. When I send these things, when I send plague, famine, wasting disease, all of these symptoms that we now call global warming, instead of recognizing them as judgment, God said, when I send these things, then you need to recognize it and you need to return to me. You need to recognize that you've gotten too far, and that's the reason I'm sending these things. But Darwin didn't like that idea, and apparently neither did anyone else. They didn't like the idea of having to submit to a sovereign God, having to examine themselves. That was too much work. So the enemy established a new gospel, a counterfeit gospel here on earth. Wouldn't be the first time he's done it, but this is something that we have gone along with and that we take very seriously, even to the extent that we allow them to cut into our bodies. We ingest their poisons. We receive their treatments and their witchcraft and sorcery. But if we would just obey what God has said, all of these little things that they're observing through science to have some sort of impact, all of those things would be fulfilled. We wouldn't need to focus on minutiae. So I'm going to explain that a little bit because I know that's not entirely clear. Science as it stands right now within mental health, they talk a lot about doing mindfulness meditation, breathing exercises, and things like that. They've been talking about that for a while. First of all, you need to understand that mindfulness meditation has its foundations in pagan practices. Secondly, you need to understand that mindfulness meditation has you focusing just in your carnal flesh, meditating within your mind. God doesn't have you meditating within your mind. He talks about being in the heart and spirit. He has you meditating within your heart, within the mind of the heart, that mind that has been transformed by the renewing by the Holy Spirit. You can't renew your own mind. It's the Holy Spirit who does that. That's not a carnal mind. That's your spiritual mind. It's your cardia, K-A-R-D-I-A in Greek. It is the mind of the heart. And who's in your heart but the Holy Spirit? That is the reason that mind is being transformed. Now, I want to give you an example of the way that science looks at things versus the way that God has established things. It's not even the way that God looks at things. It's the way he has established things. Understand that he's not just knowledgeable. He's sovereign. He's the one who established and created things to go the way they go. So here's the first example I want to give you. In Heart Known series and also in a solo line, I talk about how you need to get the flesh disciplined. So before you begin with any exercise in Heart Known series, I recommend to you that you do something to get your physical flesh, your mind and body disciplined. And one of the things that I teach you is how to do breathing exercises. But I also say that it is better for you to actually worship God, to sing praise to him. And in this way, you are accomplishing several things. Okay, so let's look at what science says. Science says that if you do these breathing exercises, you're going to reduce the autonomic arousal in your body, and you are going to somehow create a new baseline. By the way, that never actually happens. You don't create a new baseline. What happens is science teaches you that only that which is measurable is that which matters. And so your flesh being measurable, they can measure what's happening in your flesh. They cause you to stay there. And so what you do is you keep banging your head against the wall all day disciplining your flesh. And so you never actually experience healing, because healing comes from God. You have to get into your heart and spirit. You have to examine yourself. You have to receive his ministry if you want to heal, if you want to actually have a restored creation, rather than you just focusing on the minutiae of trying to get your autonomic arousal down. And so therefore, science comes up with solutions such as biofeedback. You look at what's happening with your heart rate. You look at what's happening with your breathing. And now they say, well, if you do this, then you're going to heal. It's not true. It doesn't heal. But since they've put out research, whatever's on paper is what's true to science. What happens to all the trauma that keeps jacking you up? What happens to that spirit of fear that keeps compelling you? Listen, the researcher defines what the outcome is. They're the one who says success is going to be based on whether or not this person's autonomic arousal comes down, as measured by lowered heart rate, slower breathing. I don't know what else. Oxygen levels, who knows? And they have a lot of complicated language and everything else to make it sound really smart. But all it's saying is that congratulations, as a result of looking at your heart rate on this monitor, as a result of watching your breathing, you're able to slow down your autonomic arousal. Is that healing? Has it accomplished anything? Has it restored the creation? No. God's the only one who can do that. Has it integrated the lesson that God sent in that experience? No. So you have a lot of different treatments that really are just looking at one minutia of a bigger picture. Now, bringing down your autonomic arousal is important for this reason alone. God commands you to discipline your flesh. That's the bigger truth. He commands you to discipline your flesh. But if you stay in your flesh, you can't continue to be disciplined. You know why? Because your flesh isn't disciplined. You wouldn't tell a child to discipline itself. You have to be disciplined by something that is actually disciplined. The word tells us that he has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love, power, sound mind, and self-control. So it's not actually us that discipline our physical flesh. It is God in our heart and spirit. We have to get into our heart and spirit in order to invoke the power of that spirit. Otherwise, we have not chosen him. Now, the second suggestion that I give you in Heart Known series and in A Soul Aligned for disciplining your flesh, I explained to you that as you are worshiping God, as you are singing praise to God, I want you to think about this. You find your God song. My God song is How Great Thou Art. When I'm singing How Great Thou Art, I am focused. I am meditating the mind of my heart, my cardia, on God. I'm singing praise to him, and God inhabits the praise of his people. So I'm ushering in God's presence. And if I'm ushering in God's presence, am I not also chasing away the enemy? And as I'm singing that praise, I'm breathing deeply into my diaphragm in order to sing, aren't I? Did I need to hook myself up to a monitor and focus on a piece of minutia from that process? Or is it better that I just do what God established, and then I get all of these blessings and benefits from doing that because he already knows what he's established? I don't need to pull it apart. I just need to obey. Do you see that? Years ago, I was seeing a therapist when I was in my 20s, and I remember that therapist saying to me that she noticed that as I would learn things, as I would learn carnally certain concepts, I had a difficult time integrating the learning. That's not because I had a learning disorder, whatever that is. I wasn't developmentally slow. I didn't have a syndrome. But ultimately, she was making sort of a useless observation and diagnosing a problem. Nothing wrong with observation. God says to observe. He taught the priest to observe at the temple, to observe what was going on with a person if they had a rash, for example. But when you go to a doctor and they look at God's creation and they give some sort of diagnosis and then impose a treatment, and you have no idea how that fits into the design that God has given you, it's useless. It's completely useless to you. Her telling me about that didn't change anything. It didn't help me to understand why that was. It only pathologized me with no real effective information for me to be able to do anything or for her to actually do her job. Now, let me tell you Why seeing this from God's perspective is important. When the world does an assessment, and I've done many of these assessments did many of these assessments in my career, and then at the end of the report, we say, okay, these are the things that we saw. These are the things that we're recommending. Do this, do that, change your diet. You're having trouble with attention, slow down, integrate information, write things down. That's a lot of minutiae, isn't it? It might give you a little bit of help, a little bit of assistance, but it doesn't really get to the problem. It doesn't solve anything, and it doesn't see you as a whole person as God created you and designed you. It doesn't tell you what's going wrong in that situation and why it is that it's going wrong. That's what's important. Why is it that you're not integrating information? Now, at 20 years old, I had been in therapy for a very long time, since I was a child and was removed from my father's house. But I had experienced no healing. So I was continuing to experience this spirit of fear who was jacking up my flesh, causing me to be outwardly focused in order to feel inwardly safe, which never was accomplished, causing me to try to control, causing me to be compelled by distraction. How do you ever integrate anything? And then if you don't have a model for how to integrate, how to examine, how to relate with your creator for the reasons, receiving his ministry for the reasons why he sent certain things or what he's going to do with the things that have happened in your life, how do you ever integrate? Now I want to bring in something else that I've taught you in Heart Known series and in A Soul Aligned regarding body metaphor. What have I told you about body metaphor? Your emotional and spiritual dilemma of your soul is going to manifest into what? Your behaviors, your symptoms in your body. God's telling a story just like he always has. He's telling a parable in your body. What is coming out of your body is coming from your heart. What's coming out of your mouth is coming from your heart. What's coming from your behaviors is coming from your heart. It is manifesting the spiritual and emotional dilemma that's going on in your soul, such as defilement, for example. So if in your heart you have integration of what has happened and you're able to get still, that might look like, for example, you being able to sit down at a meal and chewing your food, eating slowly, fully chewing your food, being able to be present, being able to be satiated, being able to enjoy your food, being able to integrate your food. Does God use that as symbolism to help you to understand that you need to feast on him, that you need to integrate his doctrine, his teaching, his ministry, that you need to be able to slow down in order to do that? You need to be able to chew and ponder and digest what he has said. So the reason it didn't help me that therapist, even though I remember it years later, what good has that done me to remember it years later, except that I'm using it as an example with you? It didn't help me for many years that she said that. It was just something I kept in mind, but I didn't have any way to control myself into being able to integrate learning, especially emotional learning. Now, if she was teaching me according to the teachings of God that I need to be able to digest, if she was modeling with me and showing me how to sit with what God has said, how to receive his word in heart and spirit, how to receive his ministry, how to be connected with him, how to slow down, how to digest, how to integrate. If she was teaching me how to obey him and obey what he has said, everything else would have come together. I would have been able to integrate other things, and I would have been able to heal. But as it is, science rejects God. Science does not acknowledge the things that he has taught, and so they cannot heal, and they don't even know how to help. I'm going to give you another example using this particular example. When I was being seen by medical practitioners, one of the things that they gave me was digestive enzymes, because they said that I wasn't breaking down food. Now look, you can observe within science that there are many things that you can do in order to increase your digestive enzymes. One of those things is actually chewing your food. No pill is going to be able to break down what you're stuffing down your throat because you're so anxious and compelled and jacked up by a spirit of fear. And your stomach is seizing, so you're not able to digest your food properly. A pill is not going to help that. But you know what will? being able to slow down, being able to get still, being able to get into your heart and spirit and digest God's truth, and everything else will fall into place. If we have the truth and we obey what he has established, everything else is going to come together. It's not really going to matter that we don't know that there's some sort of digestive enzymes that we need, because our bodies are going to function right because we're obeying what he has said, obeying what he has established. But you can't take a look at, I think I've sufficiently illustrated that you can't take a look at minutiae and address minutiae and expect to change the bigger picture. It's like taking a formula and trying to figure out, well, what do I actually have to do here? How can I manipulate this to get the same outcome? Maybe if you just obey the formula that God established, everything else will come together. Everything else is going to work. So I really want to encourage you today, stop focusing on the minutia. Stop letting others tell you what to think. Stop focusing on the research and everything else and thinking that if you could just read enough, if you could just pack enough information into your brain, then you'll understand. All you have is a bunch of useless information in your brain at the end of the day. That's all I had by the time God drew me to the Son. The Father drew me to the Son and said to me, you're about to unlearn everything you think you know. I had spent so much money on books, so much time ingesting false doctrine from the world, all to find out that all I ever needed was in one book that is quite small compared to the doctorate I got and all the books I read, all the research I read, all the useless experts that I listened to. That's the only truth. That is the only truth in his word. And he will tell you everything you need to know, and everything else is going to come together. So chew slowly so that you can digest. Feast on his word. Spend that time with him. Don't start packing things in so that you can be wise in your own eyes. A full carnal brain is totally useless to you. In fact, it's a hindrance to you being able to actually please God and get into the heart and spirit. Exercise the correct muscles of your soul. Exercise your spirit and your heart. Discipline your mind and body so that they are glorifying God and not trying to take over your heart and spirit. And always, always, the only way that you can do that is by conforming to God's spirit in your heart. Listen to him because he is spirit. He speaks from his spirit to your spirit, and he convicts your heart. That is where your true healing is going to take place, and your guide is in the word. If you need help understanding these things, which most people do, a Soul Aligned is available to you, Heart Known series is available to you, and they all stand on the word. They're all shepherding you back to the truth in the word. If you're benefiting from these videos, those books are going to sound just like I sound to you right now, because this is exactly how I talk consistently, whether it's in a book or it's on a video. But that's going to give you a more directed approach based on the word. I haven't told you anything that's of my idea, have I, in this video? All I've done is speak on the word. That's it. And then I've shared my testimony with you, which is what God requires. So that's all. That's the only difference. There's nothing in those books that come from my own expertise, only my experience and God's expertise as he has built me. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.